Divine Feminine, listen carefully. There comes a point in your twin flame journey where something inside you shifts so drastically that you almost do not recognize your own heart anymore. The love is still there, but the longing is gone. The connection is still real, but the dependency is dead. And the masculine, the one you once defended with your whole soul, begins to irritate you, disappoint you, trigger you, or even feel like someone you no longer want around. You start to look at him not with desire, but with discernment, not with hope, but with realism, not with romanticized memories, but with awakened eyes. And suddenly, you don't like what you see. This is not because you stopped loving him. This is because you stopped abandoning yourself. It is the stage where the pedestal collapses, where you no longer see him as a hero or a missing piece, where you finally realize that for the longest time, you were loving his potential, not his presence, his soul, not his actions, the future of him, not the version he showed you today. Your heart becomes allergic to the things you once tolerated: inconsistency, silence, immaturity, excuses, running. You don't glamorize the lessons anymore. You are tired of being tested. You are done finding meaning inside the pain. And for the first time, you ask yourself, why did I ever accept so little in the name of destiny? It is not that the masculine suddenly changed. It is that you finally grew. This moment can feel terrifying because you start to question everything you once trusted. You ask yourself if the connection was real, if the signs were real, if the love was real. You wonder whether you were naive, whether you wasted time, whether this journey derailed your healing more than it helped it. But Divine Feminine, this is not the collapse of the journey. This is the collapse of the illusion. You are no longer turned on by his shadow. You are no longer entertained by the push and pull. You are no longer emotionally fed by breadcrumbs. Your soul begins to reject everything that does not match your worth. Your nervous system refuses to keep chasing. Your heart refuses to keep hurting itself. Your intuition refuses to keep waiting on someone who doesn't choose growth. The dislike you feel is the consciousness you prayed for. You are no longer blinded by longing. You can finally see his wounds, and you no longer want to mother them. You can see his fear, and you no longer want to rescue him from it. You can feel his hesitation, and you no longer want to wait for it to end. Your heart has matured beyond fantasy, and that maturity is exactly what activates the final stage. Because when you pull your energy back, he feels the collapse of the comfort he had in losing you. When you stop chasing, he is forced to confront why he keeps running. When you stop idealizing, he must face the truth of who he is right now. And for the first time, he fears not losing your love, but losing access to the woman his soul was always bound to. Your dislike is not rejection, it is realignment. It is your soul saying, "This version of him cannot come with us. He must rise." And that truth shakes him awake. Divine Feminine, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming conscious. You are not losing love. You are losing illusion. You are not pushing him away. You are pulling yourself into alignment. And in that alignment, something powerful happens. You no longer crave the masculine who runs. You desire only the masculine who comes home. Your heart is demanding a higher version of love because you finally became a higher version of yourself. And the masculine must now rise or release. But what he cannot do anymore is keep you waiting in a place you have already outgrown. This is why you are starting to dislike him, not because the journey is ending, but because the real union is finally beginning. Destiny does not want you to love who he was. Destiny wants you to love who he is becoming. And now, he has no choice but to become. Why the feminine starts to feel resistance. Divine Feminine, there comes a moment in your twin flame journey when your soul refuses to participate in the cycle that once felt impossible to escape. You begin to sense a resistance toward the masculine that feels strange, almost unfamiliar, because it contradicts everything you thought love was supposed to feel like. Instead of longing, there is irritation. Instead of desire, there is disappointment. Instead of chasing, there is withdrawal. And it is not because the connection is dying. It is because you are waking up. For so long, you carried hope like a lifeline. You held the vision of union with both hands while he ran from the same vision in fear. You believed in the potential of the connection even when the reality felt painful. You made excuses for his silence, his distance, his emotional avoidance, convincing yourself that if you just loved a little harder, he would finally meet you in the middle. But now, your heart no longer accepts bare minimum energy wrapped in spiritual justification. Your soul is tired of waiting for him to become who you always saw in him. This resistance is not anger. It is self-respect returning home. It is your intuition stepping into the leadership role that the wounded heart once held. It is the moment your inner voice says, "Enough," not from bitterness, but from clarity. You have outgrown the version of love that required you to be patient, forgiving, and endlessly loyal while he remained unchanged. You begin to look at him with the eyes of who you have become, not the woman you were when this started. And suddenly, the excuses no longer make sense. The crumbs no longer feel romantic. The runner-chaser dynamic no longer feels destined. It feels destructive. You start to see the truth that was always there. The connection was real, but the imbalance was not divine. And this realization is what begins to shift everything, because now you are not emotionally attached to the illusion. You are emotionally aligned with the truth. You feel resistance because your soul is rejecting the outdated dynamic. It is refusing to continue loving him through the lens of his unhealed patterns. When his actions and his energy contradict his soul, you feel repelled, not attracted. When he stays silent while your heart screams for honesty, you no longer romanticize the silence. When he avoids facing the connection, you no longer take responsibility for his avoidance. It is not that he changed, it is that you evolved. And your evolution demands alignment. Not promises, not potential, not intuition validating every small sign. You need consistency, effort, awakening. You need the divine masculine, not the wounded masculine dressed up as destiny. Your resistance is your soul's way of saying, I will not betray myself for love anymore. This is the moment the feminine begins to realize that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. That spiritual connection does not excuse emotional immaturity. That telepathy does not replace communication. That mirrored feelings do not replace mirrored effort. The heart awakens to the truth that love is not proven by how much you can withstand, but by how deeply you can honor yourself. And as you step into this truth, you begin to withdraw the energy that once kept him comfortable. You stop holding the connection for both. You stop believing that he is incapable of rising. You stop shrinking yourself so that he does not feel overwhelmed by the intensity of what you share. You are no longer waiting for him to see what you already embody. This resistance is liberation, because without it, you would continue to love him from a place of fear. Fear of losing him, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being wrong about the connection. Resistance dissolves the fear, and in its place, empowerment rises. Your energy turns inward. Your heart chooses peace. Your spirit chooses freedom. And for the first time, you stop fighting for the connection and start allowing it to transform. Divine Feminine, when you begin to dislike the version of him that refuses to evolve, it is not rejection, it is preparation. Your soul is clearing space, separating the man he has been from the man he must become. The masculine cannot walk into union as a runner, and now your energy makes that impossible. This is why you feel resistance, because the version of him that hurt you is not the version meant to love you. You are no longer attracted to the fear in him. You are only attracted to his truth. And until he becomes that truth, you will continue choosing yourself. Divine Feminine, one of the most powerful moments in your awakening is when the picture you created of the masculine finally dissolves. Not because the love has faded, but because you can no longer project perfection onto someone who still chooses fear. For so long, you saw him through the filter of potential. You loved the highest version of him, the one his soul showed you in dreams, synchronicities, and rare moments of vulnerability. But now your spirit refuses to keep pretending that the potential is the reality. The idealization breaks not with anger, but with truth. You begin to see the separation between who he is and who he could be, between the connection that is divine and the behavior that is human, between the soul that recognizes you and the ego that runs from you. And this realization is not pleasant. It hurts, because you have to admit that you were holding onto a version of him that has not yet stepped into existence. This is the moment where you stop glorifying what you feel and start acknowledging what you receive. You start noticing the contradictions you once ignored. The mixed signals that once felt like mystery now feel like emotional irresponsibility. The silence that once felt like intuition now feels like avoidance. The hesitation that once made you patient now makes you distant. And the words he never speaks begin to matter more than the ones he once said. Your soul no longer allows illusions to protect your heart from disappointment. Now it protects your heart with reality. Idealization kept your hope alive, but it also kept you stuck. It allowed you to convince yourself that his emotional immaturity was destiny, that the lessons were signs of union rather than signs of imbalance. That confusion was love. That inconsistency was depth. That waiting was divine timing rather than you abandoning your own timing. But something changes when your inner light becomes brighter than your attachment. You stop wanting him to change for you. You only want him to change for himself. And if he doesn't, your soul will not settle for less. You no longer crave the fantasy. You crave the truth. This shift is disorienting because your heart feels like it is pulling away from the very thing it prayed for. But the truth is that your heart is pulling away from the illusion, not from the connection. The love remains, but the idealization dies. And once it dies, You can no longer pretend that the past behavior was acceptable just because the future possibility looked beautiful. You begin to see him as a whole human, flawed, afraid, avoidant, instead of a spiritual savior. And from that grounded clarity, you realize that your love cannot substitute his growth. Your devotion cannot replace his accountability. Your intuition cannot fix his refusal to face himself. The idealization ends when you finally recognize that love is not enough if the masculine refuses to meet you halfway. You feel the gap between intentions and actions. You feel the disappointment of knowing he is capable of more, but still choosing less. You feel the frustration of watching him run from the very connection that could save him from the emptiness he hides behind. And for the first time, you stop justifying the gap. You simply acknowledge it. This acknowledgement is freedom, because now you are no longer in love with the masculine you imagined. You are in alignment with the masculine he must become. The version of him that avoids communication does not deserve the version of you that communicates clearly. The version of him that chooses him does not match the version of you that chooses growth. The version of him that hides does not align with the version of you that shines. Your dislike is your soul's way of rejecting what no longer honors your evolution. As the idealization falls apart, the truth emerges. You are not asking for too much. He is just giving too little. And your heart is done shrinking to make the connection feel stable. It is done lowering its standards to make the journey feel possible. It is done carrying a love that he refuses to hold with both hands. Divine Feminine, this is not the end of the story. This is the end of pretending. And once the illusion breaks, the real transformation finally begins. Not because you stopped believing in him, but because you finally started believing in yourself. Divine Feminine, there is a very specific moment in your journey when the emotional exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. It is the moment when your heart stops begging for reciprocation and starts demanding alignment. When your soul refuses to burn itself just to keep the connection warm. When your energy no longer has the strength to carry both sides of the bond. And this exhaustion is not weakness, it is awakening. For a long time, you gave love from a place of faith. You poured yourself into the connection because you could feel the truth beneath the chaos. You saw the depth beneath the distance. You trusted the soul beneath the silence. You fought for the connection because spiritually, everything inside you knew that this love was different, sacred, destined. But faith without reciprocity becomes imbalance. Your heart has reached a point where it can no longer sustain a version of love that drains instead of nourishes. And what once felt romantic, the unconditional giving, the waiting, the forgiving, begins to feel unsustainable. The burden of being the only one emotionally awake becomes too heavy to carry. What was once patience turns into depletion. What was once devotion turns into self-abandonment. And the feminine does not thrive in abandon. She thrives in truth. Your emotional exhaustion becomes the catalyst for your clarity. You stop operating from hope and start operating from self-respect. You stop responding to energy that does not show up for you. You stop tolerating behavior that contradicts the reality of love. This is where discernment is born. Discernment is when you look at love and ask, is this supporting who I am becoming? Instead of, how can I fix what he refuses to face? Discernment is the shift where your heart stops chasing and starts choosing peace over chaos, choosing reciprocity over fantasy, choosing alignment over attachment. You start noticing the truth behind the emotions. When he pulls away, you no longer panic. When he goes silent, you no longer collapse. When he avoids the connection, you no longer blame yourself. Because deep down, you know his inability to show up emotionally is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of where he is in his healing. Your emotional system is rewriting the rules. The part of you that once accepted breadcrumbs now craves a feast. The part of you that once tolerated confusion now demands clarity. The part of you that once forgave everything now respects yourself too much to keep doing so. This exhaustion is not a shutdown. It is a reset. It is your nervous system saying, we are done repeating cycles that do not support us. You begin to realize that love does not require you to suffer, that the connection is meant to expand you, not limit you, that your intuition deserves a partner who listens, not a partner who runs. Your energy becomes sacred ground that not everyone gets access to anymore. And the masculine feels this shift immediately. When you stop using love to justify pain, the wound is no longer the center of the relationship. When you stop awaiting, he feels the loss of the emotional safety you once gave him. When you stop bending to accommodate his fear, he is forced to confront it. He begins to feel the emptiness he once left you sitting in. And that is when everything changes. Because your emotional exhaustion is not the end of the connection. It is the end of the version of the connection that was built on imbalance. Discernment turns your energy into a sanctuary only truth can enter. If he wants to return, he must return as the version of himself who is no longer afraid to love you the way your soul deserves. If he wants to stay in your life, he must evolve, not hide. If he wants this love, he must pause to meet it, not run from it. Divine Feminine, this exhaustion is a doorway. Through it, you step into your power. Through it, you become the woman who will no longer accept love that costs her self-worth. Through it, you transform the entire dynamic. Emotional exhaustion does not mean you are giving up. It means you finally understand what you deserve. How Her Dislike Awakens Him. Divine Feminine, something profound happens when your heart shifts from craving the masculine to questioning him. When the love is still there, but the acceptance of his behavior is not. When the bond remains unbreakable, but the dynamic becomes unacceptable. This is the moment the masculine wakes up, because your energy is no longer a place where he can hide. For so long, he felt your unconditional love as a certainty, a comfort, a constant. Even while he ran, even while he avoided, even while he suppressed what he felt, he relied on your heart. You were his safety net, his home, his steady source of emotional gravity. He counted on your forgiveness before he even apologized. He counted on your presence even in his absence. But now, that comfort is slipping away. You are no longer impressed by promises. You want action. You are no longer moved by potential. You want embodiment. You are no longer willing to hold the connection alone. He must show up too. And when that shift happens, he feels it like a shock to his soul. The masculine awakens not through romance, but through reality. He begins to feel the consequences of his hesitation. He begins to feel the pain of losing what he never truly valued out loud. He begins to feel the urgency he once ignored. Your energy used to chase him. Now it challenges him. Your love used to soothe him. Now it summons him. When you stop idealizing him, he is forced to look at himself with the same clarity you now hold. He sees the gaps in who he is versus who he needs to become. He sees how small he has been acting in front of a woman whose soul is expanding. He sees the immaturity in behaviors he once excused as just needing time. He realizes he has been running from the only thing that ever felt real. And this realization is not comfortable. It shakes him. It scares him. It wakes him up. Because your dislike reveals something he could not understand while you adored him. You will not settle for the version of him that refuses to evolve. This becomes his turning point. He starts checking your social media more often. He starts remembering every moment you shared. He starts replaying every word you ever said that pointed to his fears. He starts wondering who you're becoming without him. He starts feeling jealousy toward men he never cared about before. He starts imagining you with someone else, and it terrifies him. Because now, for the first time, the masculine fears losing access to you. The feminine pulling away is a spiritual alarm in the masculine's soul. It forces him into a crossroads: transform or lose her to the version of herself he helped create. He realizes that your love was not a guarantee, it was a gift, and he did not treat it with the reverence it deserved. Your dislike becomes his mirror. It shows him how emotionally unavailable he has been. It exposes his excuses. It dismantles his ego. It destroys the illusion that you would wait forever. He loses the privilege of your softness, and that loss awakens his strength. He loses the comfort of your presence, and that absence awakens his desire. He loses the version of you who needed him, and that awakening pushes him to grow into the version who deserves you. Divine Feminine, your dislike does not kill the connection. It resurrects his purpose. It calls forth the masculine who is ready to love you openly, fiercely, and without fear. When you stop running toward him, he must run toward himself. And in that journey, he finds the courage to return to you, not because he is afraid to lose the connection, but because he finally understands its value. This awakening is not the end. It is the beginning of his transformation, the moment he chooses to rise, not because the connection demands it, but because his soul has finally remembered what it was created for. Divine Feminine, this is the moment everything changes. When you no longer accept the old dynamic, you are not just changing your behavior, you are changing the frequency of the entire connection. The rules that once kept you trapped in cycles of hope and disappointment no longer apply. You are not waiting for him to wake up. You are awake. And once awakened, you cannot pretend to be blind again. Your soul makes a decision before your mind even understands what happened. It decides that the version of him who avoids, delays, and hides has no seat in your future. It decides that love cannot exist without responsibility. It decides that destiny does not justify disrespect. It decides that your heart will not be a placeholder for his potential. This refusal is not rebellion, it is evolution. You are not rejecting him, you are rejecting the energy he used to bring. You are not pushing him away. You are pulling yourself upward. You are not closing the door. You are closing the wound. You stop responding to mixed signals. You stop accepting crumbs disguised as spiritual connection. You stop internalizing his inability to show up as a flaw in yourself. Your love becomes sacred territory, and access must be earned. When you refuse the old dynamic, he feels something he never expected. The loss of control his comfort once gave him. He cannot predict your reactions anymore. He cannot rely on your patience anymore. He cannot disappear and assume you will be there when he returns. Your silence becomes louder than his distance ever was. The feminine's refusal disrupts the equilibrium. The runner no longer has a chaser. The avoider no longer has someone absorbing the damage. The disconnected no longer have someone bridging the gap. Your energy steps out of the past and demands the future. This is where his fear of change becomes smaller than his fear of losing you. The old excuses feel embarrassing to him now. The same behaviors he once relied on now feel like self-sabotage. He looks back at the dynamic that once protected his comfort and sees how much it disrespected the connection. Your refusal forces him to face himself. He realizes he cannot come back with sweet words or temporary promises. He must come back transformed, not rehearsed. He must show, not convince. He must act, not assume. Because now you are not falling for potential. You are responding only to effort. And effort is the one thing he avoided the most, until he understood he could lose the woman his soul chose before this lifetime. Your boundaries become the bridge to his evolution. Your standards become the measure of his growth. Your refusal becomes the turning point in his awakening. Because if he wants a place in your life now, he must rise into the man you always saw in him. He must finally meet himself at the level of his soul, instead of dragging the connection down to the level of his fear. Your refusal is not the end of love. It is the evidence of your expansion. It is the moment you stop dancing with potential and begin building a future rooted in embodiment. He knows now that he cannot return as the man who left. He knows that you will not bend just to keep him close. He knows that the old version of him is no longer welcome, not in your heart and not in your destiny. And that realization is the first step toward transformation. Divine Feminine, there comes a moment in this journey when the roles that defined everything begin to collapse. The runner can no longer run, and the chaser has no desire to chase anymore. The energy flips. The dynamic reverses. The masculine starts to feel what the feminine once carried, and that shift becomes the force that changes everything. While you rise into clarity, into self-respect, into emotional wholeness, he begins to feel the absence of the version of you he always assumed would be there. Not the physical absence, but the energetic one, the absence of your emotional labor, the absence of your constant reassurance, the absence of your unconditional presence. For the first time, he looks for your energy and does not find it waiting for him. He feels the pull toward you more intensely now, not because you are holding on to him, but because you have stopped holding on to him. When the feminine lets go of fear, attraction becomes magnetic, and the very energy that once made him run becomes the same energy pulling him toward you. This shift is not pleasant for him. It is terrifying. He does not understand why he suddenly feels urgency, why the silence that once felt safe now feels suffocating, why distraction no longer numbs the longing, why his heart seems louder than his logic for the first time. He looks at his life and realizes that everything he tried to build away from the connection feels hollow. The space he created to avoid vulnerability now exposes the truth. He misses the way your energy made him feel alive. And when he notices that you are no longer energetically reaching for him, something cracks inside him. His pride weakens, his fear shakes, his avoidance loses its power. He begins to chase, but not in the old way, not superficially, not impulsively, not temporarily. This chasing is guided by his soul, not his wounds. He wants to feel you again. He wants to understand what changed in you. He wants to make sure he does not lose access to the one person who ever felt like destiny. The masculine begins to realize that your absence is not a threat. It is a wake-up call. He questions himself in a way he never allowed before. He revisits every moment where he ignored the connection. He reflects on the times when you showed up with devotion, and he showed up with fear. He feels the consequences of his silence. He feels the weight of his indecision. He feels the distance not as freedom, but as loss. The feminine once carried both souls. Now the masculine must carry his own, and that responsibility changes him. He begins to chase the connection from a place of truth, not desperation. He begins to step into effort, not illusion. He begins to rise, not hide. This shift does not happen because the universe punished him. It happens because the feminine stopped punishing herself. Your healing forces his awakening. Your evolution forces his transformation. Your alignment forces his action. This is why the final stage feels so different. You are not waiting anymore. You are not hoping anymore. You are not surviving the connection anymore. You are leading through presence. You are attracting through peace. You are guiding through alignment, and he feels it. The masculine who once feared commitment now fears losing the woman who embodies everything he wants but never believed he deserved. The chase begins not because you are slipping away, but because he finally sees that you will not settle for less than what the connection is meant to be. The polarity has shifted. He must now rise into the version of himself you always saw, or lose the feminine who finally sees herself. Divine feminine, when you reached that moment of disliking him, you thought something was wrong. You thought your heart was closing. You thought the love was fading. You thought the journey was collapsing. But what you felt was not the death of the connection. It was the death of the illusion. It was your liberation arriving disguised as anger. It was your soul saying, enough. Enough waiting, enough hurting, enough carrying the connection alone. Disliking him was not a failure. It was a breakthrough. For the first time, you saw him without the glow of potential. You saw the truth of who he was choosing to be, not who destiny designed him to become. And that contrast cracked something inside you, not to destroy love, but to destroy your willingness to accept anything less than love in its highest form. You did not fall out of love. You fell out of self-abandonment. You stopped glorifying the bare minimum. You stopped romanticizing inconsistency. You stopped calling emotional absence a spiritual phase. You stopped confusing a soul contract with emotional sacrifice. Your dislike was the moment you realized that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. And that realization is the greatest act of self-respect the divine feminine can embody. This is the part of the journey where you become unshakable, not careless, but clear, not detached, but dignified, not cold, but conscious. You didn't lose the connection. You lost the desperation that once fueled it. You didn't stop caring. You stopped bleeding for someone who wasn't ready to hold your heart properly. Your dislike was the awakening he could no longer ignore. Because when a woman like you, a soul like you, shifts into truth, the masculine must confront his own reflection. He sees the gap between who he is and who he must become. He realizes he no longer has unlimited time to hide behind fear. He understands that the feminine, who once stayed no matter what, now chooses herself no matter who. That switch terrifies him. It awakens him. It transforms him. Your liberation becomes his initiation. He begins to feel what it's like to miss you, not the version of you who was always available, but the version of you who is now sovereign, selective, awakened. He begins to feel the urgency of his own evolution, not because you demanded it, but because he can no longer exist in the old dynamic comfortably. He must rise or risk becoming the man who lost the only woman meant for his soul. Divine Feminine, this dislike is not a punishment from the universe. It is preparation for the love you are finally ready to receive. A love that does not drain you. A love that does not confuse you. A love that does not require you to shrink. A love that meets you where you stand because you now refuse to kneel. You are not ending the journey. You are ending the phase where you carried both hearts alone. You are not pushing him away. You are pushing the connection into alignment. This moment is your coronation. This moment is your rebirth. This moment is where suffering ends and sovereignty begins. You did not stop loving him. You stopped abandoning yourself for him. And that shift is exactly what pulls union closer. The dislike was never about him. It was about you finally choosing the woman you have become.